Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to Chatham House. I'm Bronwyn Maddox, the director, and I'm delighted that we have here this morning the Ambassador of Ukraine to the United Kingdom, Valerii Zaluzhnyi, also former commander of Ukrainian's armed forces. We are the avoidance of doubt, we are very much on the record and it is being live streamed. The ambassador is going to give a short speech first in English, and then we will have a short conversation and I will come to the many questions that I'm sure are going to follow. Ambassador, welcome to Chatham House. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please.
Good morning. I am glad to welcome everyone and thanks for inviting me to such this wonderful place. It's first time for me. It's a great honor for me, not only to be here, but to be here with you, very intelligent and famous people. First of all, traditionally, I start and end my every meeting with my friends and partners with word of gratitude for support. I'm thankful that we persevered. I am grateful that we continue to fight. I hope we will continue the fight and get the victory, not only for Ukraine, but for all civilized world. I'm talking about the victory as the flag of this century. And so that we understand each other exactly, I ask our interpreter to help in our future conversation. І якщо перекладачі готові, отже, я
So if the interpreters are ready, I will start with the following.
Я буду вести мову про
I will be talking about
наукові поняття.
some scientific
Буду вести мову
definitions and concepts. I will be absolutely honest and sincere. And first of all, I will be talking as Valerii Zaluzhnyi, as a person who has an experience as a person, not only with the military experience of conducting war, and also as a person with the experience in diplomatic work. And I will be sharing with you my own personal opinions and thoughts, which I hope will help us understand the future which is waiting for us and the steps we need to make. And I will repeat myself, not only for Ukraine to prevail in this war. So, dear participants, I would like, first of all, to form so-called some facts, evidence facts, which we in Ukraine use for scientifically understand what is happening. We'll be talking about some empirical judgments and the evidence facts I formed for myself. Of course, they cannot pretend to be fully scientific, but again, to what extent this judgment are of scientific nature or real, it's of course up to you to judge. So first of all, what I would like to start with and voice the first empirical judgment, and hope that you will agree with me. So the first fact of the reality, there's existence, not only of a definition, but only of a subject which we can call collective West. It does exist, and I personally consider it a group of developed Western countries with highly developed economies, first of all, developed democracies, and their own security system, such as NATO, for example. Indeed, it's a security system of the collective West, and this security system protects, first of all, the democracies and the developed economies of those countries of the collective West. The second judgment, I believe that there are a number of authoritarian countries in the world with a high concentration of power in their hands. There is no democracy in these countries. Their economies are based, as a rule, on mineral reserves, deposit of mineral reserves, or on their economy are under planned regulation. And all this is appointed to serve either the interest of the ruling leader or a ruling party or ruling movement. Everything is geared towards serving to service this representatives of authoritarian regimes. Thirdly, I believe there are countries in the world which are, as a result of historical events and desire of their own people, have managed to leave the authoritarian empires and regimes, authoritarian regimes. Some of those countries, perhaps they are lucky, we're lucky to join the collective West. Some of them, also because of the opposition of these authoritarian empires, continue their struggle, first of all, to join the civilized world. And with this, naturally, in the current situation, these countries were fighting to join the so-called Western world are at the same time retain the danger of losing their own independence. Some countries, I won't be naming them, have already formally lost the independence. Such a country like Ukraine, my motherland, as a result of a great resistance from Russia and perhaps because of its own indecision, found itself in a war for its own independence from an authoritarian empire. This is a brief statement, and I hope you will share it with me. Fourthly, my fourth judgment and statement, and it's very important to understand the sense of the war in Ukraine. Unlike those countries who have lost their independence almost bloodlessly, Ukraine has been fighting for its independence for the last 10 years with weapons in its hands. The full-scale war has been going on for almost 3 years. More than 30,000 people have already perished, have already died. Hundreds of thousands have been injured, wounded, but we continue to fight. We Ukrainians continue to fight, and it's difficult not to agree with that. The fact is probably the main proof that we're fighting, that we're Ukrainians striving. We want to live in the civilized Western world in freedom. And I want us all understand this, trying to identify or to understand the war in Ukraine. And despite all the troubles we do have them, but we have the right for our own future. For our own future, our enemy, ignoring our own desire, denies us, denies our history, denies our culture, and what is most important is trying to destroy us as a nation in a physical way, a nation with its own history and culture. A confirmation of this, not only in the stories of last century, I won't be stressing on that, but let's look at the Holodomor, Great Famine. Let's remember recent events in Bucha and Gostomel, events in occupied territories of many Ukrainian schools are operating there, the way Ukrainian culture is developing there. These facts This fact makes peaceful coexistence, any peaceful coexistence, impossible in the future, and so we cannot consider any options to stop the war on the basis of any intentions for mutual security. My fifth judgment, my fifth statement, I personally believe that the reason for what is happening in Ukraine today is logical consequences of the reluctance of the collective West, which, first of all, declares its democratic values. These are the logical consequences of the reluctance of the collective West to influence the global security system, taking advantage of the weakness of the West and as I personally see it, of the United States. In 2008, Russia began so-called expanding as the belt of its security space. In 2014, and in 2008, and then 2014, with the silence of the same collective West, Russia started the war against Ukraine, which has become the bloodiest war of the 21st century in the heart of Europe. That's a fact. Sixth statement. Today, in order to keep West in fear, Putin speaks about red lines, about nuclear weapons, and the Western politicians quite often, probably being hostage of their own voters, repeat the talk about the need to avoid escalation. Again, it's just a fact of reality. It all exists. But whether there's a question whether this war will be limited only to Putin's appetites, only concerning Ukraine, well, naturally, the answer should be given by the Western politicians, and they should be honest in the answer to the voters. My seventh judgment, it's all, again, my personal opinion. I believe that the collective West didn't believe in Ukraine. That's why Western press, fearing Putin, first gave Ukraine 3 hours first, and 3 days, then coming to the aid of Ukraine, the collective West, fearing a nuclear war or escalation, and saying this as the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, didn't provide Ukraine with the necessary amount of weapons. That's why in 2023 we failed to achieve any significant success in defeating Russia, and consequentially we entered a state of a protracted war. And by the way, again, in my personal opinion, a way out of which protracted war seems dubious and almost impossible. I will not dwell on this. I hope that you have had an opportunity to read my articles published before. By the way, I wrote those articles for you to understand what is actually happening in Ukraine, because I believe then back in 2023, we lost the opportunity independently come to the end of this war, and that's why. And my eighth judgment, my eighth statement, this is a fact of reality. This concerns all of us present here in this audience. This applies to each of you. Could you please tell me, is it a secret now that China, North Korea, and Iran have united around Russia? Or does anyone believe that these countries have united against Ukraine? If so, let me be the first to disappoint you. Most of these countries don't even know where Ukraine is. If we look carefully at such an organization as BRICS, especially at its prospects, and the prospects are for expansion. What about the collective West? Is it still afraid of escalation? Perhaps. My ninth point, an important fact of reality. The war whether you want it or not, whether your weapons manufacturers with contracts in billions in their hands want it for the next 10 years. Unfortunately, the war has changed. It has changed. I'm telling this to you as the former Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And by the way, the Ukrainian generals and analysts confirm this. A third party cannot talk about this because they were not there and didn't participate and they were not involved. But I'll come back to my statement that the war has changed. There will be no war of the 1953 model. I'm talking about the Korean War. It ended. It ended in summer 2023 in Ukraine when two professional armies, more than a million of personnel each, faced each other in the battlefield. And by the way, with the moment when robots entered the battlefield, and by the way, the Western press and the NATO generals laughed at me. But in 2024, technologies entered the battlefield. By the way, I described that fact as well. And this artificial intelligence brought those technologies in the battlefield. And it's good that nobody is laughing at me anymore. Even here in the United Kingdom, they look at the strategy of the national defense. As I understand, NATO's keeping silent. As I understand, the organization hasn't changed. What about the global security as soon as the war has changed? But still based on the global security on the Korean War principles and on the weapons inherited from the Korean War. Whether this global security is based on expensive weapons and carriers, very expensive missiles, fighter jets, aircraft carriers. It's not possible in the massive war to produce them at massive scale. The efficiency will diminish. And I will upset you again. No, unfortunately, the future global security will not be hold on to this means. But again, I won't be dwelling on that because I've described that in my articles. And the 10th statement, the most important thing I wanted to share with you, and I will tell you as a citizen of Ukraine, as a Ukrainian.
We're fighting for our freedom. We've been fighting for 10 years. We haven't become a part of the Russia-proposed union or group of countries. We see our future victory in very simple terms. To put it in a nutshell, we need to bring back, or we need to regain three basic kind of things, kind of feelings. Just try to put yourselves in the shoes of Ukrainians who hear the wailing of sirens day in and day out, and they are afraid every day that they will get a note of death from the front line because their loved ones were killed. So the first thing we need is the feeling of our own security. Everyone should be entitled to feel security. We have to be sure that at least for 100 years down the road, no one is going to attack Ukraine. Declaring of documents like Budapest Memorandum will not work in the situation with Ukraine, and I hope I've proven that before. We need to get security guarantees for ourselves and for our children, and this is something we could resolve right away, even today. And I support what the president of Ukraine said about that. Ukraine simply needs to join NATO. That's it. Or another alternative would be to turn Ukraine into NATO. Again, I've told you already that Russia has allies today, and it's going to be very difficult for us to turn Ukraine into NATO in view of that fact. But there are bright examples of that, like Israel, for instance. But in Israel, from 1948, when the first war occurred, the wars have been going on and on. This multi-suffering people keep suffering. Their children are being trained to go to bomb shelters during the air raids. Will such an option be possible for Ukraine? Maybe. Time will show, but as of now, there's no alternative to collective security in NATO for Ukraine. Again, there is a debatable issue about military capabilities of NATO, but there's no alternative to NATO. Another thing that we need is the feeling of unlimited development opportunities for Ukraine. Anyone in Ukraine should have unlimited opportunities. And all that will depend on the process of recovery of post-war Ukraine. But I'd like to draw your attention to the following. A lot is being said in the West about that, rebuilding, recovery, and all that stuff. But let's be honest, as we are here within the walls of this wonderful organization. Will recovery be possible without security in the first place? Will investors be ready to invest in a country where another war can start as soon as tomorrow? And again, I need to disillusion you here. No, they're not going to invest. No investor would be willing to invest long-term into a country which has no security. And there are some more requirements which should be met, including in this country. But first and foremost is security. So in order to get the feeling of your own development opportunities is something impossible without security guarantees. No long-term prospects without the prospect of security would be possible, at least for Ukraine. And the third point, the very simple feeling, and it's, I don't know whether people in the UK or in the US are aware of this, but I will tell you this. Each Ukrainian, all of us, want to feel that we are in our own home. We want to be where we belong, at home. Ukrainians are at home in places where they were born, where they grew up, where their parents are buried, where their children live, and where they live in peace and quiet. These are the main 10 points that I wanted to mention, and now I'll add the most important thing. Please understand me rightly. I'm here not to criticize the West or NATO. Quite the opposite. I am very grateful to the collective West and NATO, and primarily to the peoples of those countries who have been helping and continue to help Ukraine in our fight. I understand that no one is indebted to Ukraine, even in line with the Budapest Memorandum. Ukraine is fighting day in and day out in order to survive. I just want Mr. George Santayana, let's recall who he was. I just want him to be proved wrong. Either we, the humankind in whose hands the destiny of the 21st century is, we should be intelligent, and we should remember our past if we want to avoid reliving the past in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Ambassador General, thank you very much indeed for setting out what is on your mind at this point. And we're very, very grateful to have that. Let me just.
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Sorry.
No. Normally our technology and our people do not let anyone down, but it can happen. I'm going to ask a few questions and then I'll come to the questions that I know are in the hall and indeed online. Let me start by asking you about the state of the war right now. Ukraine has made this year incursion into Kursk territory in Russia, but Russia has been making advances in the Donbas. Where are we now?
Дуже цікаве питання.
Well, this is a very interesting question. I may sound a little bit categorical, so please bear with me. The very interest in this question, what is the impact of the Kursk incursion, or what the situation is at the front line, all this brings me to think that if people get interested in those things, they just observe what is going on in Ukraine as if it was a show, the way it was last year. No one is asking how much money Putin spent on war and how.
От скільки Україна отримує на ведення війни. Ні, це не цікаво.
How much money Ukraine will receive to prosecute the war. No, they're not interested. And if we take a look at the numbers, you will see that there's no point looking at other issues, because all this boils down to the availability of resources, and that's it. Nevertheless, as regards the situation, your question about what's going on there, a war is going on there. That's it. And the war has several components. If we observe this as a show that Othello, instead of drinking some poison, could have done something else, well, it's not a show. The war goes on different lines. The Kursk operation is a part of the overall military operation of Ukraine, which we are carrying out for the survival of our people and for the protection of our nation. If it was a military academy, I probably would read a whole lecture about how the wars changed over the last century. The thing is that in the modern war, the lines between tactical, strategic, and operational levels are being increasingly blurred. And the Kursk operation is a bright example which shows that Ukraine continues being around there, and Ukraine remains an active doer in the development of military science. I didn't see the military plans. I don't know what is written down under the title mission of the operation, but most likely the military command of Ukraine took into account all the necessary points and came to the conclusion that that operation is needed. That's up to the command and leadership of Ukraine as regards how to carry out that operation and what to do. There are people who will assess that, the efficiency of that, once the operation is over. Is that operation connected with the situation at the front line? Let's leave that to the experts. I just want to remind you that the war is going on and the military command is subordinated to the political leadership of the country, and it's up to them to give answers to that question, and in due time they will do so. I would not like to assess all those activities. If I were the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, probably I would have done so, but now I have no levers of influence on that, so I will leave that for those who have to deal with that. As regards the situation at the front line, again, the situation is exactly the way it can be as a result of the actions and circumstances that Ukraine is in at the moment. First of all this boils down to availability of resources. It's tough, but people are also a resource. We have to admit that. And if today Putin spends 120, 130 billion dollars per year and pays $500 per projectile, well, just compare that with the numbers of expenditures that Ukraine has, and you will compare numbers and you will understand that what is going on there is a miracle, because it could have been much worse for Ukraine. But again, what's going on there is just an outcome and the result of a set of measures and steps which were taken to make our fight successful. I will only add that currently, the main thing, and Sun Tzu was right in that, the main thing that we depend on is the human being. Everything depends on people. And when we see that there are some problems there, we try to assess what's going on there in terms of a human factor. But there are competent bodies and institutions which keep monitoring the situation and assess that. And for me, it would not be appropriate to assess the work of my former colleagues. All I know is that they do everything possible and impossible to keep the situation under control.
So thank you for that. You've put in your speech a lot of emphasis on NATO, though you've also said that there may be questions about NATO's capacity. Do you think Ukrainian membership of NATO is likely? And could NATO guarantee the security of Ukraine if it chose to do so?
Це важко відповісти на це питання, тому що
It's hard to answer that question because there are too many factors that determine the answer to this question. I will only repeat that in my personal opinion, there are two major points as regards our prospective membership in NATO. First, as of now, there's no alternative in terms of collective security, no alternative to NATO. If we seek victory for Ukraine or putting an end to the war in Ukraine, well, let's be frank, in order to get security, either Ukraine joins NATO and then NATO becomes a guarantor of Ukraine's security, including for the follow-up recovery. This is one thing. And secondly, I would like to say what I already said. The war has changed, and I believe that Ukraine, as nobody else, can strengthen NATO.
So Ukraine could become an initiator of changes in NATO to gear NATO towards the next war, which naturally we're not saying that it could start, when exactly it could start, but the organization should get ready for the war, for NATO to rebuild its own military capacity, because war is changing. It hasn't changed yet, but it's in the process of changes. It's transient wars over the intermediary period, and that Ukraine could strengthen NATO in this way. But what comes next, to the extent we can forecast, let's put it this way, under the current situations where the process of joining NATO, it's problematic, but let's be honest. Let's be honest and say that we'll be moving away from the liberalism and saying what is necessary, what is not, but let's focus on the necessity of the moment. In my personal opinion, still, I believe that the decision should be made to accept Ukraine into NATO in order to strengthen NATO, first of all.
That is a very interesting point about how NATO needs to rebuild its capacity itself. Let me ask you a different one, though. We are coming up to the American election, and we have candidates who say very different things about NATO and about Ukraine. How concerned are you about the US election? And can Ukraine win without the US?
Ну, дивіться, дуже чудове питання.
That's an excellent question. Let's start from the very end, whether Ukraine could prevail without the United States. And I will tell you, repeat again, apologies for that. Then back in 2024, Russia has got allies. If necessary, I can prove it to you. China, North Korea, and Iran. And there are two quite simple questions: whether they got together against Ukraine, and B, a simple question, whether Ukraine is capable independently on its own to overcome those four countries. Perhaps not. And that's what I'm saying. For Ukraine, it will be difficult to prevail on its own in this fight. But at the same time, we should ask whether that's a Ukrainian fight or whether it's assault on democracy. And then we ask a question whether it's necessary for the United States, whether the United States are interested. We should ask this question to the United States. But in terms of the American elections, I don't want to discuss them at all. What I know for a fact that, first of all, the United States is a democratic country. And if we're looking that a certain candidate comes to power there and something will change, I don't think so. First of all, it's a developed democracy, and they protect their democracy no matter which leader comes there, and the country will be based on democracy and governed by the people who live there. And it's only up to them whether America is a great country with all the opportunities laid by the founding fathers. Well, sometimes I say this way: it's difficult to say who will win. I don't think I need to dwell into that, but difficult to say what happens after the elections. It's quite a difficult subject to speculate on. But the simplest way I can say this follows: that the elections, the American elections, there will be those who win the elections and those who lose. Unfortunately, Ukraine is will need to deal with those who, on the side of those who might lose the elections. But Ukraine should have United States as a partner.
Well, thank you for that. Excuse me. We're all waiting to see the outcome. I was very interested in the way you defined victory at the end of your speech. And you talked about three basic sensations: feeling of our own security, possibilities of development, Ukrainians living in their own houses. I wanted to ask you whether there is any definition of victory for Ukraine that doesn't mean getting back all the land.
Well, again, I want to come back to what I was saying at the beginning. In no way I haven't mentioned territories when I was talking about victory and prevailing. Again, the Ukrainians need three things: safety, security, and the feeling of its own home. For me me as Valerii Zaluzhnyi would characterize that, the sense of home, of belonging. I would put it this way: had I lived in my own house and was aware that a neighbor took a part of my garden, I would tell to my neighbor, you need to resolve this. If not now, but your sons will need to resolve this issue. But I would act this way.
Thank you. Let's go to questions more generally. I have lots more, but there are going to be lots here. And thank you for the ones coming online as well. But let's start over here. There's a hand up right there. Yes. Please, could you say who you are?
Yeah, thank you. Nina Kuriata, Tortoise Media. I will use my privilege of knowing Ukrainian and speaking to His Excellency in our native language. Пане Валерію, хотіла вас запитати, вчора президент
Your Excellency, I wanted to ask you, yesterday President Zelensky finally presented its victory plan to the people of Ukraine after presenting it in a closed forum to the Western leaders, and he claimed that if the plan is implemented, then to his estimates the war should finish in 2025. Could you please tell us to what extent you believe this plan is efficient, and do you really believe that the war will be over in 2024? You can choose answering whether as your ambassador of the Ukraine to the UK, or Valerii Zaluzhnyi, or the former commander-in-chief. Thank you very much for your question. It's an excellent question. Let's put it this way. Valerii Zaluzhnyi will share his own vision in order for us to come to the essence of the questions. By the way, in my opening remarks, I mentioned that. Let's come back to the things I mentioned, that Ukraine is facing not only Russia, but it's quite a powerful coalition of powerful countries. In which way Ukraine and its political military leadership could overcome or prevail over this coalition of those countries. And well, I've got the feeling that the coalition, this will only increase. Okay, then let's start thinking and answer this very simple question. There were some people in Ukraine claiming that the problem is that nobody brought us the plan from the general staff. I think it's absolutely crazy. We need to fight these coalitions with the widest possible means. How can you rely and expect a plan coming from the general staff? Let's put it aside. I will share a story of my daughter told me. That's a very interesting one in order to come back to this main question about the victory plan. My daughter told me that Ukraine resembles a situation of a sick person in A&E. She's just about to graduate as a doctor, medical doctor. So a patient is an A&E, and all excellent consultants got together. They brought the equipment and medications. They managed to prevent death. You know, just the patient has survived. That's what happened actually after the February 2022. It's a bad analogy, but still, in order to understand the question, in order to put a full stop for this global understanding, but the sick person, patient is an A&E, and in a couple of years' time, his kidneys stopped working. That's what happened with us. So we lost the electricity generations, and then these consultants got together and they started to think how we can help the patient in order to save his life without kidneys. And then my daughter says, what about those consultants? Develop a strategy for this patient, stand up and leave the A&E, the emergency departments. Then what I'm saying for myself, that collective West should have seen this big threat after 2022 with the China, Iran, and the North Korea, and they should have developed the plan to protect its democratic institutions. Whether that's been done by those people who are concerned about global security, and they're concerned that there's an advanced assault on democracy initiated by Russia. Let's be honest, perhaps no, because of some range of reasons, because of the reasons we were asked, the elections, the US elections, etc. Then it is absolutely makes sense. And what President Zelensky does, he is preparing this plan when the steps are drafted, and not only for Ukraine. Naturally, Ukraine should stick to the plan, but these are the list of steps concerns, first of all, those countries who should be interested for the war to stop within Ukraine, not the way it happened 100 years ago. And I mentioned that we mentioned Mr. George Santayana. Winston Churchill in 1940 opened the eyes to the world, and that's what he said. Unfortunately, everything will be happening somewhat differently. That's why the president of Ukraine drafts a plan providing several steps in order for those countries who support us for them to do something. I haven't seen this plan, but I absolutely agree that this plan was necessary. Look, where Putin takes this 150 billion of dollars, not yuans or Russian rubles, to fight the war in Ukraine by selling gas. And those people who support Ukraine, they purchase this gas. I'm not criticizing them. I'm just giving you the situations. And 100 million US dollars on a daily basis for those distributing Russian oil around the world. Is it up to Ukraine to stop those vessels somewhere in the Bahamas? But physically, it's perhaps could be possible. But then that's why this whole plan is about this. And then I believe that Russia won't have any other option if we start asking these questions. What is the plan and why is it necessary? I don't agree with that. Why the plan was first shown to the partners? Whom else should we show it first of all? Should we bring it to the Crimea region, to our people there, to demonstrate what is necessary to be done with North Korea or Iran? No, I don't think so. Next, please remember, it's difficult to give forecasts in war. Don't listen to any experts. It's not possible to have any forecasting in the war. The only thing which works in the war is mathematics.
До України, до плану президента України. Я хотів би вам нагадати, що в 1940
Again, let's go back to the president's plan. I will remind you that in 1941, Mr. Roosevelt made his economists work out a plan which weighed some 15 to 16 kilos. And that plan showed to Roosevelt that they will be able to enter the war only in 1944. In Russia, in the former Soviet Union, Stalin forced the General Staff to show him in 1941 the Kursk operation of 1943. This is about mathematics. So where is this pile of papers to show this? Again, we need to go back to the plan because we need a general global strategy. Without that, it'll be very tough for Ukraine to do anything. What does it mean? It means that something should be done by the US, something should be done by Germany. Someone should decrease its buying Russia's oil. Some countries have to introduce tougher sanctions against Russia. That's what the peace plan is all about, and we have to be serious about that, because it's not that straightforward. For us Ukrainians, this is something we need in order to survive. But how things will develop in the world down the road, well, for that I would recommend those who showed that plan to take a close look at that, or to open up what George Santayana said and to figure out whether this should be done or not, or take a look at what Roosevelt did in history.
Thanks very much indeed for that. And the Santayana saying, obviously being the one about if you don't remember history, you are doomed to repeat it. There's all kinds of hands up. Let me go here to the second row. Can you keep our questions short, please? I'm trying to get quite a few.
That's a very short question. John Wilson, I'm a member of Chatham House and a journalist. When is Ukraine going to conscript its women to fill the gaps in its armed forces? Conscripted 500,000 women.
There's a really interesting question about conscription, which we're planning a podcast on. Please answer.
Але в мене є чудова відповідь. У мене є чудова відповідь.
But I have a wonderful answer to that. Look, if it is necessary for us to call up women in order to save Europe from war, we will definitely do this. But I think we should primarily prevent a large-scale war in Europe the way it was in 1939 by other means, not by drafting Ukrainian women.
Okay, at the back on the aisle. I mean, yes, you. But could you wait for the microphone, please?
Francis Farrell from the Kyiv Independence, from Kyiv. Я теж запитаю пану послу українською.
I will also ask my question in Ukrainian. Yes, we do have a victory plan from the president, but I'd like to look back at the press conference which you gave in December last year. It was a very difficult time, an onslaught on Avdiivka, the end of Ukrainian counteroffensive, and we actually debated how many more people should be called up. In terms of an internal plan, at the time when you were the commander-in-chief, what was the plan at that time, and how, during the last year, how much implementation of that plan Ukraine has reached? Well, I understand that there are problems in Ukraine as regards the essence of your question. I'm not going to hide that. Of course, Ukraine does have a problem. But I'd like to remind you that Ukraine received a real independence in 1991, a formal independence, shall we say, in 1991. And only as late as 2013, we received real independence. And I think that since 2013, we've been trying to build the kind of democracy that we've discussed today. And building democracy over the last 11 years, of course, we've made quite a lot of questions, and we are entitled, quite a lot of mistakes, and we are entitled to making our mistakes. So when the war came to us, we all made mistakes. We analyzed our mistakes. We drew lessons from that. Well, as we change the country, change the mentality and self-awareness of Ukrainians, and trying to change the very order in our country, putting that on democratic basics. And therefore, we had to change our approach to mobilizations as well, because previously the approaches to mobilizations were pretty much Soviet, and they actually date back to the times of Peter the Great, and the principles thereof had remained unchanged for many, many years. But we will be able to change that only when we have enough time for that, when we have enough time to bring up a whole generation which, without any interference from the state, will take up arms and go to defend their homes. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time, so we have to resort to certain limitations. In a democratic society, all this is perceived very controversially. But as a matter of fact, Russia is waging war not just in physical and information sphere, but they are also waging a war in the cognitive sphere, because it is because of the Russian influence that certain decisions were made which made our mobilization drive even more difficult. So in order to prosecute a war, one needs resources, including people, and guns, and munitions. And the material resources, guns and munitions are changing, and the importance of the classical meaning of those resources will be going down and being replaced by technological input. And maybe that technological input will make the necessity for people not that acute a problem. And I hope that our government and leadership will find the right way to communicate with the population so that people understand the importance of armed fight right now. And all the plans will be implemented provided we have these two resources, people and military material resources. And well, material resources not depend on us 100%, but as regards the human resource, everything depends on Ukraine exclusively, and I hope Ukraine will find the right ways to go about it and to change the attitude of people, I mean, in terms of their reluctance sometimes to fight. I hope that there will be enough people who will bring about positive results here. But that could have been done in 2023 when we were fighting against Russia. But today, when we get 1,600 Shahed UAVs monthly and a huge number of munitions and resources of Russia come from elsewhere, all this requires a concerted effort of Ukraine and our partners to put up a proper fight.
Thank you for that. On the aisle towards the back, please.
Good morning, Colonel Alexander Lagutenko, National Guard of Ukraine from Royal College of Defense Studies, and actually an officer who was under your command. Your Excellency, my question is, how has your experience as the Commander-in-Chief Armed Forces of Ukraine informed your current role as ambassador to the United Kingdom, particularly in securing ongoing British support for military assistance? Thank you.
Thank you. And the question was, how does your experience as Commander-in-Chief inform your new role as ambassador to the UK, and what in particular do you want the UK to do?
Дуже цікава тема. Надто цікава.
This is a very interesting topic. I once had a meeting with the students at the King's College, and I'll try to elaborate on that. So I will try to be very quick. Let's speak about diplomacy. Recently, I was at a meeting where I saw two respectable diplomats talked with each other and discussing the third person. One person says, I know this person, he is a perfect English speaker. He has a good command of French and German as well. So I listened to that, and he also said he's a very good diplomat. So that nearly killed me. I said maybe that person is primarily a good linguist. Well, what I'm trying to say that diplomacy is a main means of implementation of international relations, which first and foremost presupposes the realization of your national interests of your country in the political, economic, military and strategic sphere, and in cultural and ideological field. These are our interests which we have to actualize through diplomacy. And the question is how my experience as Commander-in-Chief informed the advancing of our interests in the UK. Well, it's difficult. In terms of military and technical sphere, we need to get certain weapons, and I've managed to sort it all out. No problem. I've also sorted out major political issues, that's no problem. But when it comes to economy, for instance, for me, this is something of a problem. How our economic interests should be advanced here, and how to make the UK interested in coming closer to the Ukrainian economy. Again, it brings us back to the issue of security, first and foremost. And when people trust me, they know who Zaluzhnyi is, and I have governmental officials and business people coming to me. Their first question is, what about security? When do you think you will be able to come back to a secure life? But obviously, diplomacy requires specific, dedicated training, and you have to be developed in all the four spheres that I've mentioned. Even if we are talking about cultural, artistic issues, this is something that you have to be trained in. And I doubt that if you have a good command of one language or another, you would be able to understand the intricacies of a culture of ethnic dances, for instance, or something like this. All this takes a lot of training. Just like the service of the commander-in-chief, this all gives you a wonderful chance to dedicate yourself to serving your own country.
With that, we are going to have to stop. I'm so sorry. There are so many hands up here and terrific questions online. We've addressed aspects of them, but I'm sorry I couldn't come head on to any of the questions online. There are a lot of interesting ones about aid and how aid is best used in Ukraine, and that's something I know our team will pick up. But we've kept the discussion very much, given the ambassador's background, on the current state of conflict and of international relations. So with that, thank you for coming. Thank you for your questions. Please join me in thanking Ambassador Zaluzhnyi.